There was just a recent poll that came out that I think it's 84% of Israelis want Netanyahu to go. And I know conservatives, my own tribe in the United States, adores Benjamin Netanyahu. But as an advocate for the vulnerable, I criticized Obama's drone war when he killed thousands of civilians. Well, the IDF has killed a lot more than thousands of civilians in prosecuting this war against Hamas.
You talk about Pope Francis. John Zmirak, who writes for The Stream, you write for The Stream. Both of you are Catholic Christians, and yet both of you know that this Pope is less Catholic than I am. I mean, I don't know how it's possible. I guess I was talking to John about it a few days ago, but this nightmare of a statement on blessing same-sex unions, I mean, it is diabolically confusing because it sends the message that wink, wink, yeah, we're not gonna say that is sin. We're not gonna say this is God's idea. And this is not God's idea. We're just going to avoid it, and we're going to say, oh, yeah, we're going to bless everybody. I mean, it's so cynical that it's painful for anybody, who cares about right and wrong, who's trying to process this, anybody who was raised as a Catholic. Do you have any sense of how that's possible, that could happen? I never thought I would see that in my lifetime.
Again, I think it's feigning concern for the vulnerable, for wealth, power, and prestige. It's victimism. What was most heartbreaking about that for me was two things. Number one, what bothers me most is not that Orthodox Catholics like me are, angry or feel like we're being poked in the eye. What's most upsetting to me is that young Catholics who strive to be holy and want to love God properly but struggle with same-sex attraction will be confused to their mortal peril.
That's the point.
That's what really breaks my heart.
No, that's exactly that's the point. We got to go to a break here, but I just want to say that is the point. Is that if church leaders are not crystal clear on this, then those who are struggling and looking for guidance and moral support and encouragement in living a holy life, they're not getting that, and so we're throwing them under the bus. Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything? I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. You mentioned the Pope's call for the end of violence in Gaza. And again, this is the level of naivete that's just insane. It's insane. What does he say? You quote him in his Christmas message. The doddering Pope, I inserted the adjective doddering. The doddering Pope said, "My heart grieves for the victims of the abominable attack of September, October last, and I reiterate my urgent appeal for the liberation of those still being held hostage." Oh, that's nice. Good. He then says, "I plead for an end to the military operations with their appalling harvest of innocent civilian victims and call for a solution to the desperate humanitarian situation by an opening to the provision of humanitarian aid." Again, who wouldn't want that? But how naive can you possibly be? This is like John and Yoko saying give peace a chance. I mean, I don't know anybody except for Nikki Haley who loves war, or Lindsey Graham. But, the idea that there's an easy solution, the whole reason the IDF is in there is because they don't see any other way forward. I just find it fascinating that the Pope would really fuel the blather.
Well, here's my frustration with that. And again, I agree with you. There seems to be a lack of consistency and clarity. I do agree and maybe disagree with you. I know I disagree with Zmirak, but I agree with, I think what's in the most recent poll, I agree with 83% of Israelis that they're not proceeding properly and that they're probably undermining Israel's security and interests, which with the way they're operating in Gaza. But the day that the Pope Francis came out and made the statement on same-sex partnerships or whatever he called it, on that very day, Jimmy Lai went to trial. Pope Francis has never spoke out for Jimmy Lai, a Catholic layman, a billionaire who funded freedom activists in Hong Kong who will die in prison. There have been 7 Catholic bishops who have been disappeared. He never talked about that. There were there's 3 million Uyghurs sitting in concentration camps in China, and Pope Francis has never addressed that. So I do believe, again, even where I would agree with him, I think that the IDF, and I think Netanyahu was able to do in a few weeks what it took Bush 16 months to do, which was drop the ball and take his eye off of what his responsibility is, the short-term and long-term security of the people of Israel.
So in the interests of fairness, because I don't want to be an ideologue any more than I don't appreciate it when somebody's being merely ideological. So help me understand your perspective, since I respect you on this. In other words, What is it that you believe Israel is doing wrong in this conflict?
Well, here you can look. We're over, I think, 6,000 children killed. So my organization, the Vulnerable People Project, is in daily communication with every Catholic religious leader in Gaza, including the Missionaries of Charity, another religious order that we helped evacuate the sisters from Ukraine when Russia was shelling their convents. That same day, they were moved to Gaza from Ukraine, so we're in direct communication with them. About 2 weeks ago, IDF soldiers, for apparently no reason, launched 3 RPGs into a Missionaries of Charity home for disabled children. It's just pointless.
Hang on a second. So you're saying that was intentional? I don't get that. I also don't see that happening. Why would they do that intentionally?
Well, look at the civilian casualties. We can say we don't believe the numbers, but they've dropped the equivalent of, what is it now? It's over. 2 Hiroshima bombs, and they've dropped more bombs in Gaza than Russia has dropped in 2 years in all of Ukraine. I support the nation state of Israel, but I think Israel's best interests are advocated in hunting and destroying Hamas, and doing so in a way that preserves their long-term security. There was just a recent poll that came out that I think it's 84% of Israelis want Netanyahu to go. And I know conservatives, my own tribe in the United States, adores Benjamin Netanyahu. But as an advocate for the vulnerable, I criticized Obama's drone war when he killed thousands of civilians. Well, the IDF has killed a lot more than thousands of civilians in prosecuting this war against Hamas. Hamas needs to be destroyed. But the government of Israel's primary objective is the security of Israel. And if you just look at public opinion around the world, and I think as this war is unpacked, it's going to be very bad. So the first thing my organization did is, I don't even want to say what country, Eric, but there are synagogues in countries around the world that were very vulnerable. On October 7th, the VP put armed guards outside of synagogues in African countries that were vulnerable to attack. I would like to see the IDF be much more discriminate in its prosecuting of this war. And there is, and it's hard to talk about, because Jew hatred and anti-Semitism is something John Zmirak and I have been writing about together for almost 2 decades. Something I'm very much concerned about. I really believe that these attacks in October 6th, this was Israel's 9/11. But if Israel is as ham-fisted as we were in our response to our 9/11, they will not survive. John Zmirak and I, our friendship began over our both opposing the invasion of Iraq. And I think that was a great catastrophe at the time. People said I wasn't a patriot. I didn't love my country. I was an infantry veteran. But I could do the math. And ISIS exists now. They didn't exist before. Al-Qaeda is bigger than ever, and the Taliban is back in control of Afghanistan. And I am afraid that the way that Netanyahu is prosecuting this war against Hamas has been so ham-fisted that when we talk in 20 years or 10 years, or God forbid 3 or 4 years, I think the evidence will already be overwhelming that the response was not, they're not responding in a way that's ensuring Israel's long-term security.
And so what do you suppose that they should do? I mean, I think I asked you this before, but just so I'm clear, that they're not doing.
Well, I think that they needed to be more judicious. They had the opportunity to take their time. They needed to look for allies in the region and unite them together against Hamas. I'll say the quiet part out loud. We know that the Gulf states want Israel to destroy Hamas. We know this, right? We know that Hamas, that Iran goaded Hamas into doing this to break the agreement with Saudi Arabia. We need the Gulf states and we need other Muslim countries to say the quiet part out loud. Israel needed to work with them to encourage them to support them in this war. They definitely need to limit the civilian casualties. They needed to be more thoughtful in protecting Christian communities in Gaza and outside of Gaza. But there was this enthusiasm, this emotion, this rush to action, and I think that's what Hamas wanted.
You think that's what Hamas wanted? That's what makes this so interesting. Wow.